Imagine being told you cannot speak your language, you cannot practice your ceremonies, you cannot gather with your own people, everything that makes you taken by law. Now imagine, decades later, your grandchildren dancing in full regalia through the very streets of that same country. That is not a story of forgetting, that is a story of surviving. The Sioux people, made up of three closely related groups, the Lakota, the Dakota, and the Nakota, have called the Great Plains home for centuries. Their world was rich with ceremony, oral tradition, warrior honor, and deep spiritual connection to the land. Communal celebrations were at the center of that world. Parades, processions, and public gatherings were not entertainment. They were prayer, they were memory, they were identity. But in the late 1800s, the United States government began a systematic effort to eliminate Native American cultures. The Dawes Act of 1887 broke up tribal lands. Children were taken from their families and sent to boarding schools where speaking their native language was punished. Ceremonies were made illegal under federal policy. Traditional dances, spiritual gatherings, and even the wearing of ceremonial regalia were restricted or outright banned on many reservations. For decades, the Sioux people were forced to keep their traditions hidden, passed down quietly in homes, in whispers, away from the eyes of authorities. Survival for the Sioux people did not always look dramatic. It looked small, patient, deeply determined. Grandmothers kept beadwork techniques alive, passing patterns hand to hand. Elders carried songs in their memory when drums were not allowed to sound. Families remembered ceremonies in private that they could not perform in public. The Lakota word for this kind of endurance is meaningful. It is not the endurance of defeat. It is the endurance of people who know that what they carry is worth protecting. Then came a slow turning point. In 1934, the Indian Reorganization Act began reversing some of the most harmful policies. And in 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act finally gave Native Americans the legal right to practice their spiritual traditions openly again. But the traditions had never truly stopped. The Sioux people had not been waiting for permission, they had been ready. Powwows, the large intertribal gatherings that include parades, dance competitions, drumming, and ceremony, began growing in visibility and scale. Veteran celebrations, which had always held deep honor in Sioux culture, became public expressions of pride. Tribal parades returned to reservation towns and surrounding communities. Today, Sioux tribal communities across South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, and beyond hold annual parades and powwows that draw thousands of people. The Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, the Oglala Sioux Tribe at Pine Ridge, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, each community has its own celebrations, its own songs. Its own distinct styles of regalia that reflect generations of artistry. The grand entry at a powwow is perhaps the most powerful of these parade traditions. Flag bearers lead the procession, often military veterans who carry both the eagle staff and the American flag, an act that holds layers of complicated and profound meaning. Behind them come the elders, then the head dancers, then the children. This is not performance for outsiders, it is affirmation for the community itself. It says, "We are still here, we remember." Youth involvement has become one of the most meaningful parts of these celebrations. Young Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota children learn their language, their dances, their songs not from textbooks but from grandparents, from aunts and uncles, from the community that surrounds them. The parade route has become a classroom. There is a lesson in the story of Sioux parades that goes beyond history. When systems of power tried to silence a people, took their land, separated their families, outlawed their prayers, those people did not stop being who they were. They adapted. They protected what mattered most, and when the weight lifted even slightly, they brought everything they had preserved back into the light. The drums did not go quiet, they went underground. And then they came back. Today, when a Lakota child dances in a parade for the first time, wearing regalia her grandmother helped sew, moving to a drum song her grandfather taught her, that is not just a parade. That is a people keeping a promise to themselves across generations, and that is worth knowing about. If this story stayed with you, tell us in the comments, what part of Sioux cultural history would you like to learn more about? And if you know someone who should hear this story, share it with them. We'll see you in the next one.